It started with a simple proposal. I was nervous as hell, but I'd never felt more certain in my life. We'd been together for years, and I knew she was the one. I got down on one knee in the middle of our favorite park, sunlight filtering through the trees, and I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. She said yes, of course. We laughed, hugged, and I felt like I was on top of the world. I hadn't known happiness like that in years. The first few weeks after the engagement were everything I'd hoped for. We talked about future plans, our house, kids, stuff that felt real, like I was finally building something durable. But I started noticing small things. She'd be distant sometimes, distracted when we were together. She'd brush off my questions about her day, and her phone was glued to her hand more often. I told myself it was nerves, or maybe just the stress of planning a wedding. Still, a nagging part of me kept sensing something was off. Then came the night I found out the truth. I'd been suspicious for a while, but I couldn't ignore the strange messages I saw on our shared cloud storage. I was poking around late one evening trying to find some wedding inspiration when a folder caught my eye named Jake. My stomach sank. I hesitated, fingers trembling, then clicked open. Inside were dozens of texts, pictures, and videos. It wasn't just a flirtation, it was something much deeper. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scrolled through the messages. Flirty comments, late-night conversations, plans to meet up. Their words spilled out like poison. She lied about everything, about working late, about family dinner plans, about her weekend trips. All along, she'd been sneaking around with Jake, her coworker. I saw her voice in those messages, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she called him babe. I'd never felt such an icy blast of betrayal before. I closed the laptop so hard it made a dull thud. My palms were clammy and my vision blurred with rage and heartbreak. My stomach twisted like I'd swallowed a stone. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a hollow, bitter laugh. How could she lie? How could she pretend everything was fine when she was with him? I'd given her everything, my trust, my future, and she'd thrown it away like it was nothing. The worst part was the silence afterward. She acted like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been caught. She kept smiling, acting innocent, as if the betrayal was nothing. I kept thinking about the look in her eyes that night I found the texts, that mix of guilt and defiance. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not without a fight. That's when I started planning. It's funny how clarity hits you in those moments, clearer than ever, even amidst the chaos. I knew I had to strike back, but I didn't want to do something impulsive. I wanted her to feel what I felt, betrayal that cut deep and left a mark. I needed to make her see that her lies had consequences. I couldn't just walk away. I had to make her regret ever crossing that line. I stayed up all night, mapping out every detail. There were things I could do, ways to make her see the damage she'd caused. I knew her weaknesses, her secrets. I'd been a good husband, or so I thought. She'd taken that for granted, and now I was done being the forgiving one. Whatever I did, it had to be calculated, something she wouldn't expect, something that would hit her where it hurt most. I looked at the clock. It was nearly dawn. My hands were sweaty and my mind was racing. I poured myself a glass of scotch just to steady my nerves. As I sipped, I stared at her phone number and my contacts. I knew what I had to do. I'd confront her when the time was right. But first, I had to get every piece of evidence, every whisper of her betrayal locked away. So I printed the texts, downloaded everything, just in case she tried to erase her tracks. She thought she was clever, but I was one step ahead now. There was no turning back. My world had flipped upside down, and I was finally ready to expose her. I'd start with her, but I knew this wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about showing her I wasn't going to be a pushover anymore. She'd regret ever crossing me. And once I was done, I would make sure she understood that no one, not even her, could lie and cheat without consequences. I wondered how she was sleeping that night, probably blissfully unaware that I had everything I needed to destroy her. I could feel my jaw tight. This was war, and she had no idea what was coming. Do you want me to continue with the next part? The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck. My stomach was still twisted, and my hands felt like they belonged to someone else, numb, trembling. I knew I couldn't hide from this anymore. No more pretending everything was fine, no more denial. I had the evidence and I was ready to use it. I got out of bed slowly, trying to steady my breathing. The house was eerily quiet, like someone had already left me behind. The coffee tasted bitter, but I forced myself to drink it anyway. I couldn't afford to be weak now. My mind kept circling back to her, her smile, her laugh, the way she looked at me like I was the only one in the world. That all felt like a lie now. Every moment, every memory was tainted with her deceit. I knew. I had to confront her, but I didn't want to do it coldly. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. I waited until she was out of the house, probably at work. Then I made my move. I took the printed text messages, the downloaded files, and carefully hid them in my backpack. I didn't trust her not to find them if I left them lying around. I needed them to be safe, just in case. I drove to her office during lunch hour. The parking lot was nearly empty, a dull gray expanse that mirrored my mood. I walked in, trying to mask the trembling in my knees. I had a plan. I'd call her, tell her I needed to talk, but I was lying. I wasn't going to give her a chance to lie again. No, I was going to lay everything out in front of her face to face. The evidence would do the talking. I found her at her desk, typing away. She looked up when I approached, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Hey, can we talk?" I asked, voice steady but with an edge of steel underneath. She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, what's wrong?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the screenshot of the messages. Her face went pale, her hands clenched into fists, but she stayed silent. That silence was more telling than any words she could have spoken. "I found this last night," I said, voice low and controlled. "While I was snooping through our cloud. All this time you were lying to me. You've been sleeping with Jake." She tried to deny it, but the look in her eyes was enough to crush any illusion of innocence. "That's not what it looks like," she whispered, voice trembling. "Oh, really? Because I think it's exactly what it looks like." I slammed the printouts onto her desk. "You lied to my face about everything, about working late, about loving me, about us. I gave you everything, and what did I get in return? A coworker in our bed." She looked away, tears pooling in her eyes, but that only fueled my anger. "Don't pretend you're the victim here. You've been cheating on me for months, and I didn't even see it coming. How could you?" "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It was a mistake. I was confused." "Confused? You're sorry? You don't get to just say sorry and expect everything to go back to normal. You destroyed everything we had." I clenched my fists, feeling the adrenaline surge. "This is over, our wedding, everything. I want my keys, my stuff, and I want you out of my life." Her eyes flickered with guilt, but also with defiance. "You don't have to do this. We can fix it." "No," I cut her off sharply. "You made your choice, and I'm done cleaning up your mess." I paused, then added, "You should know I've got all your messages, all your calls. I'm not giving you a second chance." She looked crushed, like I'd just punched her in the gut. I could see her trembling, but I didn't care. I turned away and left her standing there, the weight of her betrayal sinking in. Driving back home, my mind was racing. I'd made the first move, but this was just the beginning. I knew her well enough to know she'd try to spin this, try to convince everyone she was innocent. But I had the proof, and I wasn't about to let her wiggle out of this without consequences. I sat in the car for a while, then pulled out my phone. This was the moment I'd been planning for. I was going to send a message to her boss, her friends, anyone I thought she might try to manipulate. They needed to know the truth about her. I wanted her exposed, humiliated. Not just for me, but for everyone who might have ever trusted her. Before I hit send, I took a deep breath. This was the start of my revenge. I didn't want her to walk away unscathed. She had to feel the weight of what she'd done, the betrayal, the broken trust. The message was simple: here's the truth about her name. I attached the screenshot, the texts, everything. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going to be a doormat anymore. As I pressed send, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not happiness, far from it, but a kind of clarity, a determination that I'd rebuild from this, stronger and smarter. And well, she was about to learn that betrayal had a price. Do you want me to continue with the next part? The fallout was immediate. I could feel the ripple effect even before I left the house that afternoon. Her phone started blowing up with calls and texts I knew she'd try to hide from me. I watched her walk around the apartment like a ghost, her face pale and eyes flickering with panic. She kept glancing at her phone as if expecting everything to disappear if she ignored it enough. I stayed quiet, watching her, and I felt that strange mixture of satisfaction and disgust. I'd never wanted to see her fall this hard, but I also knew she'd never understand what she'd done to me unless I made her feel it. I wanted her to realize she'd crossed a line and what that line cost. When she finally caught my eye, her voice cracked. "What are you doing? Who are you messaging?" I raised an eyebrow, deliberately calm. "Just some friends, people I think you should meet." Her face twisted in confusion and fear. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "You've been lying for months. You think I wouldn't find out, that I wouldn't see through your bullshit?" She started to cry then, big tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please, I'm sorry, I really am. It was a mistake, I swear. Just tell me what you want." I took a long breath, feeling the tightness in my chest. "What I want is for you to leave. I want my stuff out of this house. You're no longer welcome here, and I want everyone to know the truth. No more secrets." Her voice was barely audible. "You're going to destroy me." I stepped closer, voice low. "No, I'm just making sure you understand what you've lost. Trust, respect. Your marriage, all gone, and I've got the proof to back it up, so don't bother trying to deny it anymore." She looked defeated, but her stubborn streak was still there. "You're overreacting, you're angry, but—" "I'm not angry," I interrupted. "I'm done being a fool. I trusted you, I loved you, but you threw that all away. Now I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." That night, I sat down with my laptop and started drafting messages to her friends, her coworkers, her family. The truth wasn't complicated. Her texts, her lies, her betrayal. I knew the damage I wanted to do. I wanted her to feel exposed, vulnerable, and humiliated. Not just to get back at her, but to make her understand that cheating comes with consequences. That trust is something you don't take lightly. I also knew I had to prepare for her reaction. She'd probably try to spin it, deny everything, or even turn it around on me. But I had enough. I had everything she tried to hide. I sent the first batch of messages, then leaned back in my chair, feeling a strange sense of calm mixed with rage. This was the first step, and I wasn't stopping until she felt every ounce of what she'd done. The next morning, I woke up to her frantically texting and calling. I ignored her, knowing she'd try to manipulate me into a false sense of security. I'd already made my move. I'd sent the truth out into the world, and now I just had to wait. Wait for her to realize that her secret was no longer hers alone, that her lies had become everyone's business. While she panicked, I started packing up my things. I knew I couldn't stay in that house anymore, not with her lying and sneaking around behind my back. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of watching me break, so I kept my movements cold and deliberate. Each item I packed was a step away from her, a step toward something I'd rebuild, something I'd control. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "This is over. Don't bother contacting me. I'm done." I didn't want to waste time explaining myself. She already knew. I knew she'd try to call or text, but I was done listening. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences, that I was serious about ending everything. As I locked up the apartment and handed over the keys to the landlord, I felt a strange, bitter satisfaction. I'd taken everything that mattered, my dignity, my trust, my future, and I'd made her face the reality. I'd made her see the damage her lies had caused, and I'd done it without crossing into viciousness. Just honesty. Hard, unflinching honesty. Walking away from that place, I knew I'd never get those moments back, but I also knew I'd come out of this stronger. The betrayal had cut deep, but I refused to let it define me forever. She might have thought she was clever, sneaking around with her coworker, but in the end, she had only made me more determined. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can start climbing again. And this was my wake-up call, my moment to reclaim myself from her lies and betrayal. I might be broken right now, but I'd rebuild bigger, better, and smarter. And she'd learned that betrayal comes with a price she'd never forget. Next part. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. I kept busy, but inside I was raw and hollow. Every time I saw her number pop up on my phone, my stomach clenched. I knew she was trying to reach me, probably to spin some story or beg for forgiveness. But I wasn't interested in her tears or apologies anymore. Not after what I'd discovered. I stayed away from the house, avoided her social media, and focused on clearing my head. But I couldn't ignore the voice in my head telling me I had to do more. Revenge wasn't just about making her feel guilty. It had to be thorough, decisive. It had to sting hard enough for her to understand that betrayal has a cost, a price she was about to pay. One night I sat down with a plan that was simple but brutal. I'd start by exposing her to everyone she cared about. Her job, her friends, her family. Not just a little warning, full transparency. I wanted to strip away her facade and make her own reputation suffer for what she'd done. First, I drafted a message to her boss. Short, straightforward, fact-based. I explained the situation, attached the evidence, and told him I was stepping away from the relationship but felt obligated to inform him of her actions. I didn't want to be malicious, but I also knew her boss deserved to know the kind of person they were employing. Next, her friends. I knew some of them were close, others not so much. I picked the ones I knew she relied on most. I sent them each a message, a simple notification that her secret was no longer safe. I kept it calm but firm. Just a heads up, these texts reveal what she's been hiding, thought you should know. The responses were immediate. Some called me a liar or a jealous ex. Others admitted they'd sensed something was off but didn't want to believe it. But a few, those who mattered, thanked me for the honesty. One message stood out in particular from her best friend. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea she'd do this. If you want to talk, I'm here." That one stung, honestly. Not because I wanted her sympathy, but because it confirmed I wasn't the only one blindsided. That she'd managed to keep her secret from everyone, even her closest friends. It made the betrayal even more profound. Meanwhile, she was still trying to reach me, calling every few hours. I ignored every single one. I wasn't going back. I'd burned that bridge. The only thing I wanted now was to make her feel the consequences of her choices. That night I went to bed with a strange sense of calm, something I'd never experienced after a betrayal like this. I'd taken control. I'd made her vulnerable, exposed her secrets, and sent her reputation into free fall. I didn't enjoy it exactly, but I understood now that sometimes revenge is about reclaiming your dignity more than hurting someone else. Next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages. Some of her family had seen what I'd sent. They were shocked, disappointed. I could hear the whispers of conversations turning against her. Good. She'd lied to them too about everything. I had to wonder how she'd explain herself now. I spent the rest of the day clearing out my own belongings, making plans to move on. I refused to be chained to her lies anymore. I packed up some essentials, booked a new apartment, and started sorting myself out. It felt good, liberating even, to take back some control. No more deceptions, no more heartbreak, just me fighting my way back. By the time evening rolled around, I knew I'd done enough damage, at least enough to make her realize she'd lost everything. I wanted her to understand that betrayal isn't just a mistake, it's a choice with consequences. And her choices had sealed her fate. I sat in my new place, looking around at the empty walls, and felt a strange sense of relief. Like I'd finally taken the first real step toward healing. It wasn't going to be easy, I knew that. But I was done being the victim. I'd taken back my power. I also knew I had to keep my distance from her. She might come crawling back, begging or trying to fix things. But I wasn't interested in second chances, not anymore. I'd learned that some betrayals aren't forgivable. They're just lessons. And I was ready to move forward, no matter how much it hurt. Because if there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that sometimes you have to tear down everything you built to see what's truly worth saving. And I knew now that I deserved better than her lies, her betrayal, and her broken promises. Next part. A few weeks passed, and I thought I'd finally hit a point where I could breathe again. The ache in my chest was duller. I was starting to get some clarity. But I knew better than to think I was done. Betrayal leaves scars, and I wasn't about to forget what she did to me. Yet, oddly enough, I also felt a strange resolve brewing, something that said I wasn't finished yet. Revenge, I realized, isn't always about the immediate blow. Sometimes it's about making her pay in ways she never saw coming. One afternoon, I sat in a coffee shop, mind swirling with plans. I had her social media, her contacts, even her email. I've been quietly gathering information, what she posted, who she talked to, her habits, anything I could use. I wanted her to feel exposed, vulnerable, like she'd made me. But I also wanted her to see that I wasn't just retaliating out of anger. I was thinking bigger. I decided that her reputation had to take a hit that she wouldn't recover from easily. I knew her pride was fragile and that she cared deeply about what others thought. So I crafted a plan. I wasn't going to send her a direct message or post anything myself. No, that was too obvious. I wanted to work behind the scenes quietly so she'd never see it coming. First, I created a fake social media account, anonymous, professional, somewhat mysterious. I started by liking her posts, commenting subtly, making sure she noticed me but couldn't tell it was me. I wanted her to feel watched. Then I began sharing some of her more questionable posts with her friends, her family, even her coworkers, anonymously, of course. Nothing violent, just enough to make her realize how much her lies had become public knowledge. She started getting paranoid quickly. I could see it in the way she checked her phone obsessively, in her frantic texts to her friends, asking if anyone knew what was happening. It was perfect. Her carefully curated image was unraveling and she didn't even know who was doing it. One night I finally sent her a message through the fake account. Just a simple comment on her latest post. People aren't always who they say they are. She immediately responded, asking who it was. I kept quiet, letting her stew in her own suspicion. Her reactions were priceless. She was panicked, defensive, trying to figure out who was behind it all. The next morning I saw her frantically calling her friends, asking if anyone knew who was behind the anonymous posts. I kept watching, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about punishing her anymore. It was about making her realize that her actions had consequences beyond her control. Meanwhile, I continued to keep my distance, focusing on myself. I'd started working out again, reconnecting with friends I'd ignored. I refused to let her betrayal define me. But I was also preparing for the final blow, something that would seal her shame and make her understand that betrayal isn't just a mistake, it's a legacy. I knew I had to be patient. Revenge, I realized, is a slow burn. It's not about rushing to hurt her but making her feel helpless, exposed, and small. I kept the fake account active, watching her fall apart a little more every day. She was losing her grip on her image and her peace, and honestly, I loved every second of it. One night, I received a message from an anonymous email I'd created. It was a long, detailed account of her affair, everything I'd uncovered, along with her lies and her attempts to cover everything up. I knew she'd been trying to pretend her way out of it, but this time she couldn't deny the truth. The email ended with one line: "You can run, but you can't hide from yourself." I felt a mix of triumph and satisfaction. She'd be forced to face herself soon enough. Her lies, her betrayal, everything she'd tried to keep hidden would come to light. I sat back, the sense of victory washing over me, and thought about the next step. I was almost there, just a little more patience. Because the best revenge isn't about quick payback, it's about making sure she never recovers from the fall. And I was determined to see it through. Next part. The night I finally closed the chapter was strangely quiet, almost surreal. After weeks of orchestrating my plan, watching her unravel bit by bit, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. The moment had come to make everything official, to give her a taste of what she'd really lost. I had spent so much time building this revenge, layer by layer, small by small, that I could almost feel the weight of her downfall pressing down on her. I met her at the courthouse, her face a mask of uncertainty and guilt. She begged me a few days earlier, tried to spin some version of the truth that I saw right through. It was too late. All that was left was this final act. I handed over the keys to the apartment, the last piece of the life we'd once shared. Her hands trembled as she reached for them, but I didn't stop her. "Here," I said calmly, voice steady but cold. "This is everything you wanted, your independence, your freedom. But don't forget you've got a lot to answer for." She looked at me, eyes wide with regret, tears streaking her face. "Please, it doesn't have to be like this. I'll fix everything. Just give me another chance." I shook my head. "You had your chance and you threw it away. You chose Jake over us, over everything we built. You lied, betrayed, and broke my trust. I hope you remember that when you're alone." Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was stupid." "You're damn right you were stupid," I snapped. "You had a choice. You chose to cheat, to lie, to manipulate. And now you're paying the price." As I watched her turn away, I felt an odd mixture of relief and emptiness. Yes, I'd won. I'd taken everything she cared about and handed it back to her in the form of a broken mess. But inside, the ache was still there, the hollow space where love once lived. I knew I'd carry that scar for a long time. Driving away from the courthouse, I felt lighter somehow, like I'd finally reclaimed my dignity. The revenge was complete, every piece of her shame exposed, every lie shattered. I'd made her face herself, and she'd learned that betrayal doesn't just end with a broken marriage, it leaves a permanent mark. Standing outside my new apartment, I took a moment. I looked at the quiet city streets, silent, still like the calm after a storm. I realized I'd come out of this smarter, more cautious. I'd learned that some betrayals are unforgivable, but that doesn't mean you can't rebuild. Maybe not her, not that love, but myself. That was the true victory. I closed the door behind me, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. I was done suffering in silence. I'd cut through the lie, the deception, and the pain, and now I was ready to start over. Not as the same person I was before, but stronger, wiser. Because betrayal, I learned, isn't just about the damage, it's about how you choose to heal afterward. And I chose to move on without her, without the lies, without the betrayal. Because at the end of the day, the only true revenge is living well despite everything that's been broken. That's what I plan to do. Live, recover, and never let someone else's betrayal define me again. The truth is, you can't control other people's choices, but you can control how you react. And in the end, that's what really matters.